Have a seat. This morning we have our chorister choir with us, and so they're going to come and sing for us this morning. While they're getting ready, if you can find the red registration pad and sign it and pass it down, it'll help us know that you're here with us, and we're glad you're here with us today. By participating in and being present in the life of the church. We're tempted to think that the meaning of being present is pretty obvious. It's step one, just showing up, right? That's pretty obvious, right? But does it really mean that? Are we to just show up? But how does that have to do with attendance? We focus a lot in church on attendance and who's here. We say, what if? What if all 1,800 church members here at First United Methodist Church showed up at the same time? Wow, right? We who work here in the church, we say that sometimes, especially when it's a low Sunday. We say, well, what if just everybody just showed up? What does it take to be a church member? To just show up? Cole, my son, he is in sports at Baker, and I'm going to tell on him since he's not here today. I'm sure it'll get around to him. It usually does. But he's in sports at Baker. Last year, he's in 7th grade. This year, he's in 8th grade. But last year, in 7th grade, he could participate in all sorts of school sports. And so one of the sports he participated in was swimming. So he got on the swim team at school. Well, he did swim team competitions with other schools. They had a coach who coached them, and you get to the end of the year in sports, and at the end of the year in sports, there is a giant sports banquet, right? If you've been in sports before, there's a giant sports banquet. And usually, and what happened in his is usually what happens at most sports banquets. They get all the ladies' sports activities and all the guys' sports activities, and they all come together for their sports banquet. And within every sport, the ladies for that particular sport have usually an outstanding athlete and a most improved athlete that's awarded in that sport. So for women's volleyball, they have an outstanding women's volleyball player and a most improved one. And then for women's basketball, they have the same thing, an outstanding one and a most improved one. And then the guys, the same way for football and for basketball and for golf and for tennis and for swimming. Okay. So they call up all the sports, and swimming is one of the last ones to be called up, and they call up all the men and women, all the guys and gals who participated in swimming. And I didn't know this, but they all walk up, and I notice there's a bunch of girls in swimming, and then there are 2 guys at Baker in swimming. So guess what? There's an award for the most outstanding swimmer and the most improved swimmer. And so one got one award and the other got the other award. And Cole got an award for just showing up, right? But did he? Did he get an award for just showing up? On the surface, it appears that way. But what other people might not have seen that I saw was that he got up every morning at 6 a.m. to take the bus from Baker over to the natatorium to swim. He had a coach who coached him and helped him improve. He learned how to be a better swimmer. He learned how to compete with other schools and to accept a loss gracefully or a win gracefully too, and not brag about it. He learned how to be a good teammate in sports and to encourage others. He learned a lot more than just showing up. And isn't that how that's how it's supposed to be when we show up here at church too? We come together as church members. We don't just show up just because. We come together because we want to encourage one another. We want to help one another. We want to learn more about Christ in our life. And we come together to pray for one another. It's more than just showing up. You know, I hear people say to me all the time, I don't have to show up to church to be a good Christian. And they're right. They don't have to show up to church to be a good Christian. But going to church doesn't make you a good Christian any more than going into a garage makes your car a car, right? You know, I have a 14-year-old car. It's a Toyota 4Runner, and it has about 150,000 miles on it, and it's a good car. And you know, I think about that car. Sometimes I'm tempted because it's 14 years old to just say, I've gotten most of the goodie out of it. When it dies, it dies. And so I'm tempted to just leave it there and not do anything to it. If I just left my car parked in my driveway and drove it, and eventually it would start having a lot of problems, right? If I didn't change the oil, didn't take it to the mechanic, didn't get new tires, all of a sudden it would just start to fall apart, wouldn't it? And to me, isn't that the same way with our own spiritual life? If I didn't tend to my own spiritual life by being with people who encouraged me, by being in worship to remind me about those great songs I can sing when I'm away from here, about the Bible that I need to read, the prayers I need to say during the week, that once-a-week reminder sustains me for the week. It's kind of my tune-up that helps me. It's kind of like my car. It needs some regular maintenance. And I need to do more than just show up. Let's remember that being together as a group is more than just being here in this building and showing up right here in this physical facility. It's about being a community and a people of God. It's about supporting each other and using our God-given gifts and challenging one another to be better Christians. Hebrews 10:25 says this. It says, let's say it together. Do not give up the habit of meeting together, as some have already done. Now remember, this was written to the early church. Don't give up the habit of meeting together as what? As some have already done. What does that tell you? Even in the early church, they're having trouble with getting people to just show up, right? With the presence. It says, don't give up that habit. Do it. See, this is nothing new, the struggle with our presence. Evangelist Dwight Moody, he's a great evangelist, and I love the story that's told about him. Here's a picture of him right there. Evangelist Dwight Moody went to go visit a man who had quit coming to church and who had said, I don't need to come to church anymore. I can be a good Christian without coming to church. And so this church member just quit showing up. And Dwight got concerned about him, so he went to go see this church member. And the church member told him, I don't think I need to show up to church to be a good Christian. And Dwight said, well, okay. Well, it was a cold January day, and they were sitting around his living room with this fire going on the hearth. And so Dwight saw that fire going, and he sat there in silence for a few minutes. And Dwight looked at the wood that was burning bright in that fireplace, and there was a little log sitting there just burning away. And so Dwight silently went up to the fireplace and took those tongs and pulled out that piece of wood. And he took it and he set it over on the other side of the hearth outside of the fire and laid it down and walked back and sat down. And he sat there for a few minutes, and the church member who hadn't been coming to church and didn't really want to, he turned to Dwight and said, I see your point. It's hard enough to be a Christian on your own. Why do we need to make it harder on ourselves? There's power in physical presence. Just showing up does count for something in our life. It's an investment of time and energy in our relationship with Christ and others. But that's not all. John 1:14 said, the Word became flesh. We read that in the Bible. The Word, John's chosen title for Jesus, the Word became flesh. Became flesh. In Hebrew, it literally meant tabernacled or lived among us. So Jesus lived among us, was one of us, felt our pain, was human like we were, felt weakness and loneliness and despair and confusion. And we're told Jesus was full of love and faithfulness, and we've seen his glory. And so the presence of God was revealed to us and with us. And we are to be present among others and do the same. We are to represent the love and faithfulness to God with others around us. Christ said, he who has seen me has seen my Father. And that's what our presence is supposed to do to others around us. We are an extension of Christ. We are an extension of Christ. Is Christ being seen through you? When you participate in the ministries of this church, when you go out into the world outside of this building, does your presence show the faithfulness and the glory of God? Does your presence show Christ to those who need to see it around you. Is the world seeing the love of God through you? That's the hard part. Just showing up, that's the easy part. Be the presence of God to someone this week. Amen.